Hello my friends, I'm Lucas and you are watching coldemonspl. I'm really glad to meet you in today's episode. It's fun to see growing interest in the channel, and you know what would make this even better?
When you click the subscription button to be my subscriber, and don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment.
Okay, let's go. The Jagdpanzer is painted in 6-color camo and now it looks like this. Pretty cool, isn't it? Today's movie is all about the weathering. We will start with a simple wash and then we will successively add more elements and embellish the model. Okay, we take the model apart, mount the mega sophisticated and technological advanced holder and go to work. The main thing is to mix the product well. I add a metal ball which helps a lot with that. Before washing, I covered the model with a satin varnish which will make the application of the paint easier. I prepared a mix of white spirit and wash in a metal container. I put this mixture on the model. The point is to not unnecessarily cover the places where the wash is unwanted. And if this happens, I immediately rub it off with a clean brush and thinner. I try to work on sections to control the drying process and effects on particular elements like wheels or welding lines. Just use the hairdryer to speed the work up. When the enamel wash was dry, I could easily start painting individual elements that weren't finished yet. I started with a large tarp on the roof of the fighting compartment. Its grey-green color required a bit of shading and brightening. Using the base color, I added a little reflective green and started painting all the deep points between the folds. Later, after adding a bit of pastel green to the base color, I started painting the highlights. It may not look professional when I have paint on my nail, but it was more convenient and I would wager that some of you here do the same. And when you paint it, it looks like this. However, in order to unify the tarpaulin with the surface of the model a little, I decided to apply a strongly diluted wash on the whole tarp. Thanks to this, I emphasized the recesses and underlined the deep areas even more. Near the edges I used it to make subtle stains on the front plate. And of course we speed up with the hairdryer. As you can see, this is my standard tool, which I use on a pair with brushes, knives and other stuff. It's chipping time! The very brown paint, more precisely green brown from AK, is a great solution when you need to paint some chips and scratches. The main thing is a good brush, properly diluted paint and a steady hand. And of course randomness, but also common sense. The chips rarely show up in hard to reach places unless the paint is peeling off there due to old age or poor primer. In addition to the brush, I also used a sponge which significantly accelerated the painting process, but also gave a great effect. In general, painting this barrel took me several minutes. Then I started to paint the chips on the hull. The scratches on light colors are more visible than on dark shades, it's obvious. Exactly because of this I have limited their amount on dark colors. Besides, due to the nature of camo, I didn't want to overdo it with the quantity because a lot is happening on the model when it comes to painting. All scratches painted so far have been supplemented by speckling. Thanks to this, paint particles created microchipping all over the model. I really like this technique because it saves time and is super efficient. Small scratches look natural and appear in quite random places on the model, but at the same time their application is quite easy to control. I painted the scratches on the side covers in exactly the same way. First a little speckling method, then gently sponge, mainly on the edges. It can also make long scratches. And finally standard brush painting. The long scratches are the most effective, but here you need to keep a steady hand because there is no room for a mistake. And done. Perfecto, super duper. Now let's play a little with oil paints. My proven and old colors are dark and light rusty shade. They are perfect for the rust effect on scratches. I put small amounts of oil paint on the spots painted in previous stages with brown and leave it for a few moments. Then I blended the paint with a clean brush, moistened in thinner and let it dry. The intensity of the effect and the range of the color depend on our skilled hand. The amount of the thinner is crucial because if we give too much of it, the paint will melt on the surface and it won't be visible properly. I did exactly the same on the hull. For the rusty oil paints I added 4 shades to paint the dirt, from black through medium grey to light grey. First I used them to create a dirty surface effect around the mystery brackets that I mentioned in the episode about building this model. You can see it if you haven't done so already by clicking on the link above. The individual shades were mixed together and tapping into the surface of the model. It's a simple technique but takes a moment. It's worth to change the brush to a clean one. If we are not satisfied with the effect, it can be roughly washed off with a thinner. To emphasize the fresh weld seams I paint them with silver paint, as if they were made in the field and the staff didn't have time to paint them. It's a logical combination with the dirt we just made. I also use the same paint to color the wire handles. Now a rare scene among modelers, a wash made of silver paint. I made it also in previous episode and here I continue building of the effect. With the addition of tap water, I applied it to the brown parts of the side shield hangers. Thanks to this, they gained a metallic appearance. The most important thing is to control that the paint doesn't accumulate in the cavities, because it will look unnatural. And of course, we accelerate drying with a hairdryer. After that, I additionally used a soft pencil and scratched the hangers vertically and horizontally. Of course, I also painted the weld lines with silver just like on the hull, and this section is ready. Now some rust. Of course, I still use products that were used before. In this case, they were oil paints that I applied in various ways to create a unique effect. It was a quick job. Easy peasy. There are minor welding marks, but this time I painted them with acrylic paint. Natural grey turned out to be perfect. Of course it has to be done without a mistake when we already have a silver filter and weld seams color. I was working more on the traces of welding and I put on delicate wash to tone their color down. However, on the hangers I decided to pull the color again. Wash turned out to be too strong. Let's focus on towing cables preparation. First of all, a wash was applied to the whole element and perfectly emphasized the rope weave. After it dried, I prepared a lighter shade of paint to apply the chips. For this I used a sponge and started applying the paint to the entire rope. All bright scratches were filled in the same way, but with the dark brown I used before. I painted the scratches in the middle of the ends with a brush because the sponge won't fit there. This place is most likely to be stripped of paint when using a rope. When the paint was completely dry, I prepared a rusty wash and applied it to the entire length of the rope. All the chips will be perfectly rusted in this way, and in addition, a rust filter will appear on whole element. After it dried, I was able to gently polish the edges of the ends and thus emphasize the rope's weave even more. The exhausts were another element to paint and do some weathering. In the beginning, the part closest to the hull was painted dark brown and the flamvernichters were in the basic dark grey color. The light grey was applied with a sponge on the lower parts of the flamvernichters as a base for the rust that will appear there in a moment. First, more oil paint was applied in the lower areas and then more thinned paint was sprayed out. It was something like a rusty wash. As it dries off, I speckled thinner paint flakes around the entire exhaust. I polished the screws around the flamvernichters silver with a soft pencil. What I didn't show is the identical finish of the lower parts of the mufflers. Later I will put a black pigment on the exhaust to simulate the fumes. And this is how they look like after being glued to the model. The asymmetrical setting does a really great job and looks like Volkswagen tuning set. After that I load the airbrush with portion of matte varnish and spray it around the kit. It was my favorite Tamiya XF86 which I used for all my models. After matte finish was done, I started to spray the buff coat to have good base for pigments application. It is not necessary, but I like to make some initial dusting in this way. On the side shields and the chassis you can see how the Minia color is making dusty in a few seconds. A thin layer is enough. It can be transparent. I did the same for other elements that could be dusty in the real tank, but I didn't want it to be too dusty because it's a model only. On the other hand, sometimes you can see military vehicles where the dust and mud are so high that doing them on the model would be criticized even though it would reflect the actual appearance of the vehicle. And now the most messiest part, the pigments in action. Despite the fact that this part of weathering always means more or less cleaning of the workbench, I like to work with them. I don't think that they are better than ready-made enamel or acrylic products for making mud because I use them too, but maybe because I started my serious weathering adventure with them? I don't know. But to the point. The first steps were applying a layer of pigments to the hull surfaces and fixing them with white spirit. I applied several layers to build a nice looking structure. Once it was ready, I let it dry and took care of the dirt on the wheels. So as not to forget, I made dirty the wheels on the inside and of course fixed them with white spirit. Then I started to gradually apply pigments to the wheels from the most visible side. As you can see, a sweaty finger is a welcomed tool in this process. Yes, I know, it doesn't look very good, but it works. The protruding edges of the wheels perfectly get rid of the pigment's excess when I run my finger over them. It was exactly what I expected. I made a fine paste by mixing pigment and white spirit in separate vessel. This thick mat then has a nice structure and behaves like the real one. And again I use my finger. The bottom of the hull also got the right amount of dirt. I glued the pigment on a wet surface. Additionally, I moistened it with white spirit again. And then I had to do some natural rubbing of the mat as a result of scrubbing of the hull over uneven terrain, bushes, grass and whatever else you can meet in the field. A cotton bud is very useful for this purpose because it crushes the pigment lumps on the surface of the model nicely. It can be rolled or we can tap with it, the choice is yours. With the brush I also worked out the characteristic long strokes on the mat. Finally, a toothpick that I made oblong scratches from branches or other harder elements. Generally, this game can last all day. You need to know what effect you want to get. And the question, how will I speed up the drying? Well, of course, by the hairdryer. A bit of mud for shields will also come in handy. As you can see, I use the same solution as on the hull. The main thing is not to overdo it. And finally, after drying, the last scratches. But to make it not so easy, the work on this part of the hull is not over. You will see the rest of the work with weathering in the next episode, because today that's all I have prepared for you. If you've had a good time, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget about the next video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment and drop a like. See you next Monday. Cheers!